Everybody, welcome back to another video with Shifty from Shifty's 49ers Talk. In today's video, we're going to preview training camp 2025 training camp for the San Francisco 49ers. There's going to be a whole lot to talk about in this video, so let's not waste any time. We're going to get into it right here, right now. But first, let's run the intro. Today is officially the first day of practices at the 2025 NFL training camp for the 49ers. And wow, what an offseason it has been. We know 2024, that was a disaster of a season. Bad vibes all around with contract situations, players getting hurt, coming off the Super Bowl loss. But this year, this team feels re-energized, refreshed, ready to rock and roll. You replace the coordinators, you bring in Robert Saleh, that brings a whole bunch of just energy and momentum. Brant Boyer, on special teams coordinator. You have Gus Bradley helping out Robert Saleh on the defense. So two really good defensive minds to just see a massive improvement, I think, in the performance of the defense. The Niners were able to navigate the rough oceans of contract situations this offseason. You pay Brock Purdy, George Kittle's taken care of, Fred Warner's taken care of. You have the Debo situation. He got traded. He seems happy in Washington, and I think overall the Niners were happy to, figure that situation out without too much drama. And here we are. We're in July. We're only about 6, maybe 7 weeks away from week 1 in the NFL season, and man, there is a lot to talk about. So what I'm going to do in this video is just kind of give you a bit of an overview as my preview from what I'll be looking for from training camp this year. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at some of the positions that I think are going to be really key and really vital for the Niners to really develop in the training camp this year. Then we're going to look at some players to focus on. We'll talk a little bit about coaching, and then finally I'll give you a few players who I think could break out this year for the 49ers. So let's move into the positions of interest, the positions that I'm going to be focusing on in training camp. So the first position we're going to talk about is going to be the wide receiver position. There's been a lot of things that have happened over the offseason and still happening up until right now. So we know Deebo Samuel traded away. You look at Brandon Ayuk, he is recovering from his injury. He doesn't sound like he's going to be back anytime soon, according to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. My prediction is going to be about week 10 against the Rams when I think Ayuk will be back when we see him on the field. That's just a prediction. Hopefully it's sooner, but that's, again, from the sounds of it, it doesn't look like they really know. So therefore, I don't think anybody really knows when he'll be back. But fingers crossed he will be back at some point this season and he'll be able to play at or near the level that we saw when he played so well in 2023. Beyond that, Jauan Jennings, there's the whole contract situation. He does seem to be handling it a lot better than guys like Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. So Jauan Jennings is going to be there for training camp. He's going to be practicing, and hopefully the Niners can figure out some way to give him maybe a year or two's extension without absolutely breaking the bank, but where both parties are happy. Jennings camp is happy and the 49ers are happy because he is going to be a key part for this offense. He was really big for us last year, and we're going to be asking more of the same for him. Then you have guys like Ricky Pearsall. He's going to miss the first couple of days of training camp. I don't think it's the biggest issue in the world, but man, this is a big training camp for him. He missed most of last year's training camp and preseason. We know what happened there. This is a huge opportunity for him to really just, build that rapport with Brock Purdy on the practice field going up against a good defense. It's a great chance for him to really elevate his game and see his production hopefully soar. Other guys you got to look at, Jacob Cowing, another second-year player for the 49ers. Lightning quick, smaller guy in stature. Could he develop into, if we're going back to Kyle Shanahan in his Atlanta days, could he be like a Taylor Gabriel type guy? He does have the speed to help stretch defenses. He's just going to have to really get down the nuances of the game. His blocking, lining up correctly, running the correct routes. And so that's going to be a huge part of him in training camp. Curious to see how guys like Demarcus Robinson look. He's probably going to miss the first 3 games due to a suspension. but he's going to be a guy who throughout the course of the season, and it's a long season, 17 regular season games, he is going to be really key for us. So then you look at some of the rookies, you look at Jordan Watkins, not really expecting a whole lot. We signed Equinemius St. Brown. We'll see what happens. But I think some of the top guys, Pearsall, Jennings, Cowing, Robinson, those are the guys to watch. Let's move quickly on to the interior of the offensive line. Number one guy I'm really going to be looking at, we'll talk a little bit later, is going to be Ben Bartch. But this is a position where the 49ers didn't get the best play last year. Jake Brendel is still penciled in to be starter at center, which I know myself included, a lot of 49er fans are not super happy about. Then you look at left guard, there was a lot of issues there. Aaron Banks did not have his best season by any stretch of the imagination. He's moved on to Green Bay. I think Ben Bartch should be the guy there. However, he's going to miss the first few days, maybe week or so of training camp. So this gives opportunities to other guys. Can Spencer Burford try and solidify his spot there? Then you have other guys like Nick Zakelj. You have the rookie Connor Colby out of Iowa, 7th round pick. So this is the big thing with training camp. We saw last year Dominic Pooney solidified himself as a right guard, and I think he's going to be good this year. But you look at left guard, when there's an opportunity, you have to pounce in the NFL. You know what they say for the NFL, it's not for long. If you have a quick opportunity, take it and run with it. And that could happen with the 49ers in this situation. I do still think, though, that Ben Bartch is probably the favorite to ultimately be the starter at left guard. Then center, maybe there's a guy like Matt Hennessy, veteran guy. Could he take over for Brendel? That remains to be seen. Let's move on to the interior of the defensive line, and this is probably the worst position group, not only for our team, but arguably in the NFL. Now, of course, it has potential to be really good, but I think starting off right now, the way you look at it, not looking so hot. Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, not great. Then you have 2nd round pick Alfred Collins. A lot of potential, a lot of buzz around him. He has been injured for a lot of the offseason so far. This is his chance in training camp to make a name for himself. You have CJ West, the 4th round pick out of Indiana, another guy who I think looks really good on tape of what he did there. Can he elevate his game? Can he make an impact as a starter? Here's the deal though, Robert Saleh, he rotates his defensive line a lot, so Collins and West, they're both going to be getting significant snaps. Training camp and preseason games are going to be huge for these guys to really step up, get to playing at an NFL level and really just making a positive impact. They're going to be playing snaps, but can those be positive snaps? Can they kind of build on their game? And by the end of the season, maybe heading in towards playoff time, they've really reached a level where they're having a big impact on the game. Other guy to kind of keep an eye on too is Evan Anderson, last year undrafted free agent. Got a chance with the 49ers due to injuries and what have you. He's another guy. Could he take another step and being a guy who can be a reliable, maybe rotation guy there? Another big thing to look at in terms of position is who's going to play opposite of Fred Warner. My guy, odds-on favorite, probably D. Winters. However, we took Nick Martin, linebacker, Oklahoma State in the 3rd round. Can he be the guy who can step in and just, he is that mold of little bit like a Dre Greenlaw. He's smaller though, is Nick Martin, but he's lightning quick. He can fly around the field. So maybe you have him just being can he get to the right gaps at the right time? Can he make plays? Can he cover, your tight ends, your running backs, things like that? Does he know will he be able to, work in the zone effectively in this Robert Saleh scheme? That's going to be really interesting to look at. And then we look at safety position. Malik Mustafa is a guy last year as a rookie out of Wake Forest. He made his mark on this team. Unfortunately, week 18 against the Cardinals, tore his ACL. I think that his timeline for recovery probably similar to Brandon Ayuk. I'm thinking maybe week 10, maybe not until after the bye week. And it's a late bye week, it's week 14. But if you can get him back then, to come on and for the final few games of the regular season and hopefully playoffs and beyond, that would be a huge boost for the Niners. But we have to think about the here and now. Jair Brown, he's kind of had a pretty good rookie year. Disaster last year. Was that Brown? Was that Nick Sorensen? Who knows? Then you bring in some free agents. So you look at Richie Grant, you look at Jason Pinnock, you look at the guy we drafted in the 5th round, Marquise Siegel. A lot of options there at safety. The guy who I'm kind of liking and what I think the starting lineup will be in terms of safeties. I'm probably thinking it's going to be week 1, Jair Brown and Jason Pinnock, but That remains to be seen. I know there's a lot of things, there's a lot of training camp to happen. That's a huge battle to look out for this year. And finally, in terms of positions, special teams. Special teams, we've completely revamped it. So we have a new long snapper, John Weeks, we have a new punter, Thomas Morstead, and then we have a big competition at kicker. Jake Moody, the much maligned Jake Moody, against the veteran guy, Greg Joseph. Now, I think for me, I don't really have much faith in Jake Moody. Just the way he kicked last year, the way he's missed big time kicks in big time situations, although at times he has also played quite well. I think we all hope that Jake Moody can kind of become the guy that we need him to be, like a reliable kicker. I'm not saying he has to be like, prime, Justin Tucker in terms of like consistently, but you want to see more consistency for sure, and just like an improvement in his play. Otherwise, the Niners, I don't think that will hesitate to go with a veteran guy like Greg Joseph. So coming up next, let's talk about certain players in particular that we need to focus on in training camp. On the offensive side of the ball, let's talk about maybe 4 or 5 players who I'm going to be looking at specifically in terms of practice reports, videos, all of that good stuff. So quarterback Mac Jones, curious to see how he does this off season. We signed him to a 2-year deal. I'm not expecting any massive revelations for him, but can he develop into a guy who can be a good backup? Should Brock Purdy miss a couple of games like he did last season? Do we have a backup who can come in and not just completely, blow the game apart? Someone who can come in, run the offense to a certain degree of competency, and give us opportunities to win games again hopefully not, but if Brock Purdy is to miss some time. I think Mac Jones potentially could. He hasn't been god awful in his career, but I think San Francisco has kind of been one of those places where quarterbacks can come here, build up their reputation, and maybe go on. Maybe we end up, trading Mac Jones if he can develop into a good backup. Something similar along the lines of what we saw with Sam Darnold, who had a year in San Francisco, then goes to Minnesota, balls out, and is now the starter in Seattle. So that's an interesting one to look at. In terms of running back, Jacob Cowing is the guy at wide receiver. Jacob Cowing is the guy I've got my eyes on. I think he's a guy who, we know we expect Pearsall to kind of be good. Jacob Cowing, I think, could be a massive X factor in this wide receiver room. Second year in the offense, he's a guy you got to look out for. Running back, rookie Jordan James. We know what McCaffrey can do. He's awesome. Guerendo had a pretty good rookie year, but he does get banged up quite a bit. Does miss some time in college. Last year wasn't able to survive the whole season and didn't really start playing until maybe halfway through the year. I like Guerendo, but I think Jordan James is a guy who could be a really good complement to Christian McCaffrey. I do think the Niners are going to look to scale back McCaffrey snaps when you compare it to 2023. So Jordan James, if he can really develop into a guy, good blocker, decent hands, running that outside zone scheme, can he do that effectively? That's something we have to look at. And I think, on the offensive side, Ben Bartch, when he is back healthy, he's a guy on the offensive line I think I'm going to be glued to. Because look, if you have Trent Williams, you have Colton McKivitz, you have Dominic Pooney, that's 3 of your 5 offensive linemen that I think you're very happy with or somewhat happy with. If Ben Bartch can solidify himself as the left guard, you're happy there. He showed some good things in limited time last year. Jake Brendel, I think he is what he is. Shanahan and Forster, they seem to love him for whatever reason. So I think he's kind of going to be penciled in there as the starter. But if you're happy with your 4 other offensive linemen, that's a good sign. Let's now move on to the defensive side of the ball, and this is going to be a lot of rookies that we're going to talk about here for players to keep an eye on. Number 1 is going to be Alfred Collins, a 2nd-round pick out of Texas. He's going to come in as a rookie, and whether he's ready or not, he is going to be playing significant snaps this year. I just don't think you can honestly roll with Jordan Elliott and Kevin Givens as your starters. I think the Niners envisioned when they drafted Alfred Collins, he's going to be a day 1 starter. So don't be surprised if you do see him week 1 at Seattle, starting on the defensive line. What he does in training camp, what he does in preseason, that's going to have a massive influence on that choice. Otherwise, maybe CJ West steps up to the plate. At edge, Michael Williams. We gotta watch this guy. This guy just super athletic freak. You know, when you look at what he did last year at Georgia, and he was our first round pick this year. When you look at what he did in Georgia last season, he had some really good moments. Excellent against the run, had some promising pass rushing moments. He was hampered by an ankle sprain and basically played on it, you know, for most of the season. So what you saw last year was definitely him not at 100%. You know, so far reviews from OTAs, minicamp, all that have been really good, really positive on Michael Williams. He gets to work, you know, with a defensive line coach like Chris Kocurek in a defense run by Robert Saleh, playing opposite Nick Bosa. You got Bryce Huff there. So he's in a really good situation. And I think the Niners are going to utilize him a lot this season. At cornerback, let's talk about third round pick Upton Stout. Now, first off, what a cool name, Upton Stout. But also, he's the guy where, you know, he can play a bit of safety, a bit of nickel back, and I think he's someone that if he can solidify himself as the starting nickel back, then that allows us to be really good in terms of your base defenses with Diamador Lenore on the outside, Renardo Green on the outside, and if you have Stout there, that's where, you know, a lot of the majority of snaps, you're going to have at least 3 cornerbacks out there. If he can find himself and get himself that spot and take it, that would be huge. So what he does in training camp, going up against, you know, slot receivers, whether it's, you know, big physical Jawan Jennings, it's going to be there, or maybe it's, you know, small, quick Jacob Cowing. He's going to be challenged by a lot of different receivers. Great opportunity for him to try and become a starter as a rookie. At safety, we want to look at Jason Pinnock, the signing from the New York Giants. You know, he was initially drafted by the Jets when Robert Saleh was there. He got cut there as a cornerback, then played pretty well with the Giants, especially the last few games of last season. Now, the Niners went out and picked him up pretty early, and they gave him a $2.2 million fully guaranteed contract. Fully guaranteed. So they are not getting rid of him. At the very least, he's some kind of a special teams ace. But I think with Jason Pinnock, they went out, they got him. They brought him in because they think he can be a starter in this defense. There were other safeties out there who've had experience with Robert Saleh, with Gus Bradley. And with Gus Bradley, there was Julian Blackmon. With Robert Saleh, Jordan Whitehead. So they decided to go with Pinnock, and I think they're going that way because they think he can be a good starter, full-time starter for the 49ers. Now, those are the players that we want to focus on in particular. Something that we're going to talk about just very quickly is the impact of coaching. So we said it a number of times in this video. Robert Saleh, Gus Bradley are brought in to help run this defense. We, of course, know Robert Saleh from his 4 years in San Francisco before. He did a really good job coaching defense with the Jets, you know, consistently top 5, top 10 defense. With the Niners, he was excellent in 2019 and 2020. And he's someone who's just going to instill a lot more confidence, I think, in the defensive players. Now, when you have guys like, you know, Fred Warner and Nick Bosa doing interviews last season talking about Nick Sorensen, these guys are going to be professionals. They're not going to badmouth their defensive coordinator and say, you know, oh, Sorensen, he was terrible. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. And I don't think he was completely clueless, but fairly clueless. Compared to Robert Saleh, Robert Saleh is going to have a plan to put in place, you know, through the various steps and stages of the offseason. He's going to want to implement what we're going to do on third down, on fourth down, third down and long, third down and short. You know, are we going to be, you know, aggressive on first down? How are we going to attack different offenses? So many of these questions will be answered by Robert Saleh. And also then you have another good defensive mind there with Gus Bradley. So I think a really big thing for the 49ers, I think what you're going to see this season is a emphasis to be able to just stop the run, number one. But I think you're going to see a lot better improvement in situational plays. Like last season, I think back to the game against the Rams where it was the Monday night game, I think, where season on the line, it's fourth down, Rams going for it, and the Rams do a motion, and then the guy, tight end's wide open. Nobody even follows the tight end. They didn't know what they were doing. And that comes down to coaching. Like, they just didn't know what the guys were doing. You look at week 3 against the Rams. This is at LA. And then you have Devondre Campbell out there in coverage. And just before the ball's even snapped, I'm like, the Rams are going to throw at Devondre Campbell. It's a wide receiver. Bam. It was first down. There you go. We just knew it was going to happen. So the situational coaching was not there. And that's going to be hugely improved with the 49ers. And remember, your two leaders of the defense, in particular, Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. They've worked with Robert Saleh before. For 2 years, both of them have worked with Robert Saleh. Bosa, the second year, we know what happened against the Jets week 2, but ultimately, these guys know the defense. They're going to help coach up the guys. Bryce Huff, another guy who knows Robert Saleh. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for the 49ers. Coaching is going to be a lot better. We'll quickly move on to special teams. Brant Boyer coming in. He was with Robert Saleh with the New York Jets. Brant Boyer was also the special teams coordinator with the New York Jets before Robert Saleh got there. So one of those guys who he just knows what he's doing. I really think that there's going to be a massive improvement in this play of the special teams, not only through the coaching, but then when you look at getting a guy like long snapper John Weeks, you have the punter Thomas Morstead. These are just guys who've been around the NFL. I think Wishnowsky was a good player last year. He was a disaster. Tabor Pepper, there was just clearly something not working there. Whether it's, you can maybe blame Jake Moody, you can maybe blame Wishnowsky, maybe everyone's to blame, including Brian Schneider, the former special teams coordinator. But I think what the Niners needed to do is what they have done. And that's really just to, overhaul the entire special teams unit. Maybe we'll see what happens with Jake Moody. But you also bring in guys like Luke Gifford, special teams ace. Richie Grant is a special teams ace. Darrell Luter Jr., he's a guy, if he can get healthy, he's also really good on special teams. Maybe Curtis Robinson down the road can get healthy, another great special teams player. So there's definitely an emphasis on special teams, and it's a thing that the Niners needed to overhaul the entire unit, and they have done that, and I'm guessing we're going to see much, much better results. They couldn't get any worse than last year, really. So that's going to be a unit to look at. And it's one thing where it's kind of hard in training camp to look at. I mean, when you're kicking, it's no pressure situations, things like that. Preseason is where you're going to want to look at Jake Moody, Greg Joseph. That's going to be where they're really going to make their decisions. And I think the Shanahan's not going to be afraid, to put those guys in situations where they're kicking 50+ yard field goals in preseason to see how they handle that pressure. But coming up next, guys, we're going to talk about a few players who I think are going to break out for the San Francisco 49ers. And thank you for watching this part of the video. So let's talk about a few players who I think are going to break out. And what I mean by breakout is these guys are going to have, go from relative nobodies to basically being potential like Pro Bowl guys who are having, essentially becoming household names. The first one who I think really could and probably should break out is wide receiver Ricky Pearsall. Yes, he's coming off a little bit of an injury right now. He'll be good to go in a couple of days, but he is primed for a big time season with the 49ers. He finished last season on a really, really strong note. Then you look at this year, he's going to have the majority of training camp. He's going to have maybe a couple of preseason games. That's going to really help build his rapport with Brock Purdy, something that we saw last year in a couple of games. Against the Lions, Purdy threw a couple of interceptions. Both times he was targeting Ricky Pearsall, and they just weren't on the same page. They were just kind of, throwing it by each other. Pearsall did actually have a pretty good and productive game against the Lions, but it could have been a lot bigger as well. But I think Pearsall is a guy, he has the opportunity. Ayuk is not going to be there for a good chunk of the season. So you have the opportunity there. He's going to have the snaps. He's going to get the targets. He could really explode onto the scene and have a great year. Looking at another player on the offensive side of the ball and someone who I think can really make their mark in the NFL, it's going to be second-year player Dominic Pooney, right guard. So he actually had a really good rookie season. It did kind of, he did kind of fade away a little bit towards the end of the season where you did see, some mistakes creeping in. But I do think heading into his second year, more familiar with the offense, more familiar with the coaching, I think he's a guy who could really take a step forward in this offense. He changed position, primarily played tackle at Kansas. Now he comes to the 49ers, got a lot of experience last season, of course, going to get a whole lot more this year. And I think he could really elevate his game and be a guy who can be seen as maybe one of the better right guards in the NFL. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to start off with Renardo Green. What a great rookie year for Renardo Green last year, making interceptions at Seattle, just playing really well, helping to shut down guys. And it's in those situations last year where it's a ball thrown to the end zone and it's just him and the wide receiver. He makes the play, no flags. You just love to see it. He's a guy who plays with a ton of confidence. He knows what he's doing. He knows where he's supposed to be. Factor in now better coaching. I think what's going to be a lot better of a pass rush supporting him. I could see him really elevating his game, maybe getting like 4 or 5 interceptions, shutting down some wide receivers. Here's the thing though, he is going to be targeted because Deommodore Lenoir, he's not going to get targeted nearly that much because I think, although maybe he's not seen as one of the best cornerbacks by fans and what have you, I think Lenoir is seen by other NFL coaches as he's a damn good cornerback. So I think they'll try and target Renardo Green. Can he live up to what he needs to do and shut down guys, make plays, break up passes, be in the right place at the right time? I think he will. I think he's going to step up and be seen as wow, this guy is a phenomenal player. Now, who I would have put here is I would have also put Malik Mustafa, but he's going to miss a lot of time here. He's going to miss probably at least the first half of the season recovering from his injury. So can't really put him there. Maybe when he comes back, he could have a huge impact. But in terms of a breakout player, let's go with a guy we talked about earlier in this video. Let's go with Jason Pinnock. The safety from the New York Giants, previously spent some time with the Jets under Robert Saleh, but he's clearly a guy the Niners were targeting specifically. They were happy to give him a fully guaranteed contract. There were other options available at safety, and they said, no, we're going with Jason Pinnock. He's a guy who's lightning quick. He's actually a really, really good blitzer, and maybe that's something that we see the 49ers throw in. We used to see it quite a bit with Talanoa Hufanga when D'Amico Ryans was here. We'd see Hufanga blitzing quite a bit, but I think that could be something that happens here with Robert Saleh. He's had 6.5 sacks over the last 3 years, has Jason Pinnock, so that could also be another aspect to his game that we really like. Look, he does need to improve on a couple of things. The angles he takes in terms of tackling, just being where he absolutely needs to be in terms of coverage. But I think with good coaching that we are going to have this offseason and moving forward through the season with guys like Saleh and Bradley, I really like the potential of Jason Pinnock, and I think he could have a massive year. I'm not necessarily talking a Xavier McKinney going to the Packers and having, 8 or 9 interceptions, but I think he will become a good, reliable safety, maybe have a season similar to maybe something like a Tashawn Gibson in 2022. Maybe 4 or 5 interceptions, makes plays, and really helps solidify the back end of this defense. Well, there you have it, guys, for my training camp preview. It's only a matter really of hours away until the players hit the practice field for the first time, and it's such an exciting time of the year. I want to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below on who are some players you're excited to see, coaching, whether it's certain positions you're going to be focusing on. There's so many changes that have happened with this 49ers team, and I'm really, really excited to see how some of these guys, especially the second-year players and the rookies, how are they going to have a positive impact on this team. Can't wait to see it. Thank you so much for watching. You guys know what to do. Like, subscribe to the channel. I know you guys, and I really appreciate all the support since I've been back doing videos. The first few videos have been really successful, so thank you so much for watching, for checking it out. And I'm gonna do a small new segment that's gonna happen now at the end of every video, and it's gonna be a random 49ers player. I just thought it'd be a fun little thing to add to the end of each video, so stay tuned for the random 49er of the video. We'll talk to you soon, guys, but before I go, I'm gonna say the butt counts, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.